Hello everyone and welcome to our first ever online Future Orchards walks. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Rose Daniel and I'm the Technical Manager at APAL. The online option also means that we're able to share with you some of the leading orchards from New Zealand, which is an opportunity we might not otherwise have had. So the theme for today's Orchard Walk is The Future is Now, and you'll be hearing from Dr. Nigel Swartz from TIA, who will be providing a summary on the learnings from the PIPS2 project and launching the Sonata tool. Jonathan Brooks from AgFirst will explore the current and future issues such as labour, trees, quality, climate and technology. Your FLA, Jessica Fernley from New South Wales DPI, will provide an update on the latest demonstration trials being held in Orange. And Ross Wilson will take you on the virtual tour of several leading New Zealand orchards. Okay, and before we get on to our guest presenters, I just wanted to share with you some of what APAL has been doing over the last 6 months since we had the last Orchard Walk. Okay, so over the last 6 months, many of you will have heard that there were some bushfires around the southeast of Australia, and some of those severely affected apple orchards, particularly around Batlow and the Adelaide Hills. And APAL has been conducting assessments to put in a submission for funding requests to government. We've also been working on biosecurity preparedness. So just recently in May, APAL staff have been trained in the emergency plant pest response deed, and we're currently developing a standard operating procedure in the event of a biosecurity incursion. And that means that we'll be more prepared if an incursion does occur. We're also conducting a tree census, which we discovered during the bushfire response that is very important for risk management and responding quickly to emergency events, which may include bushfires or incursions. And we've also been planning the next round of Future Orchards. So if you've got any feedback about the current round of Future Orchards, please get in touch with us because we'd be very happy to hear it. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to introduce Nigel Swartz, who will present outcomes from his research into the improved water and nutrient use efficiency for apple orcharding. Nigel is a research fellow in the Tasmanian Institute of Agriculture at the University of Tasmania. His research expertise is in the field of tree physiology and tree crop nutrition, and he leads the fertigation project for the Hort Innovation at Apple and Pear levy-funded PIPS2 program. Nigel, it is now my pleasure to hand over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and it's a real pleasure, a privilege that I've got to be able to present, I guess, the culmination of the last 3 or 4 years of our work at TIA and also across the country working on apples. And this, by no means, is just my work. This is a combination of work by Plant and Food Research Fellow Steve Green. Marcus Hardy from TIA is our soil physiologist, and B. Zhang Tan is our PhD student who's done a lot of the nitrogen work that I'm about to present. And also sort of overarching supervision from Dougal Close, who is our a research fellow or professor at TIA. And yeah, look, essentially what I want to do this morning is just take you through the last 3 or 4 years of what we've been doing and wrap that up into our kind of user-friendly tool, Sonata. Obviously, we would have much rather been face-to-face with you this morning. We would have been able to deliver live an Excel spreadsheet that we can take you through how the tool works. But instead, we've sort of got 20 minutes. There's a whole stack of background that we're going to sort of park and leave, but hopefully through some screenshots, you'll get a bit of a feel of what the story is around this tool. So I want to take you initially through what Sonata is, right? Sonata is essentially the primary model developed, which stands for the Strategic Irrigation and Nitrogen Assessment Tool for Apples. It's a decision support tool that will guide advisors and growers on the optimization of irrigation and nitrogen application for the major apple growing regions of Australia. The focus of Sonata is to understand how water and fertilizer applications with types, rates, timing can be managed to essentially meet the tree's needs, mitigate leaching, and optimizing productivity, so optimizing fruit quality. This is really all about your environmental footprint, and I know that you've heard about that recently through talks by plant and food research staff. And essentially, this model requires climate and soil data, which have been based on local databases and characterization, and the last few years of our work on this project. And it also requires information about tree varieties, yields, and aspect of management that you'll input. But just some really brief background that is really critical for us to understand how the model sort of gets put together is, obviously the basic understanding of nitrogen physiology in a deciduous tree, fruit tree crop like apples. We're in this kind of autumn-winter period where the leaves have fallen off and all the nitrogen from the leaves have withdrawn into storage organs, branches, and the trunk and roots. And they sit there over winter essentially as a storage reserve, which will then be remobilized for the spring next year, early season growth. And that's that nitrogen that gets remobilized essentially provides the first month or two of energy or of nutrition for that tree before roots can start taking up nitrogen from the soil. But the reason why this is important is because there's a nitrogen component that internal recycling nitrogen component has to become part of the tree's nitrogen budget, and that is a real key aspect of how that model gets put together for how much nitrogen a tree uses. So obviously in that picture above on the top right, you got your apples. So the nitrogen that goes into the apples plus the nitrogen that the tree needs relative to the amount of nitrogen that gets put on is your nitrogen use efficiency. So what we're really aiming for is to get as maximum productivity, get the tree into a productive state rather than a vegetative state, with as little amount of nitrogen as possible. And that's kind of where that tool is aiming for. Then the other side of the story, and this is this real strong interaction effect, is the understanding of how a tree uses water. So for us to be able to do that, we've installed sap flow sensors in young trees, in adult trees, in big trees, in small trees, to really understand, and both in Tasmania and also Victoria, to really understand exactly how much water a tree uses. And that underpins the water function aspect of the model. So just moving on, what's obviously really important for, I guess, any sort of authenticity for the model is making sure that we get our soils right. So for us to be able to do that, we went across the country, and we're still yet to do WA, where we've characterised the Southeast Australian apple growing region soils. So we've looked at their soil morphology. So we've taken lots of photos. We've got the ability to be able, for a grower to be able to look at a series of photos, have a bit of an idea of what their soil is going to be like, and then that inputs also like chemistry data, hydrology data, and management data into the tool. So all that information actually sits on the www.applesoils.com website, and that's on the APAL. There's a link on the APAL website there, and essentially a grower can go into their region, find which sort of soil looks like what they're going to have on their farm, and they can select that. And you can see that on the next slide here. So this is a screenshot of one of your input slides, and this is some background data, right? And the software comes preloaded with the range of soils from the 5 apple growing regions, and you'll have the option to pull down a menu for you to choose your chosen your soil series. We've got about 22 soils from all our soil surveys that we've done through PIPS2, which is on the applesoils.com web page, which you can see there in the link. And there's a whole stack of other data that's come from the Victorian soils database, and we're still yet to do WA soils. And inside of that, and this is a whole stack of stuff that you won't see. You'll see drainage class. You'll see a whole stack of scenarios around the soil matrix potential, so how much water a soil can hold, and that's underpinned by a whole stack of data that we've collected over the last 3 or 4 years for different soils across the country. The next really important aspect is really trying to understand the impact of climate on what happens from season to season. And so for us to be able to do that inside the tool, we have gone to 22 different climatic stations nearby where we've sampled the soils, and we've downloaded all the historical data from 2000 to 2018, so the last sort of 18 to 19 years. This sheet is actually hidden, but all that data there from temperature, from rainfall, from ETO, from radiation, all gets inputted into that model when you select a particular climatic region. And then obviously the really important understanding is about how your apple trees use water depending on the climate. So tree water use is calculated in this Sonata tool using the local climates that you have selected and the age-derived crop factor that you've also put into your into the tool. So you'll tell us how old your trees are, and it uses a single big leaf description of the canopy that is parameterized by a crop factor, KC, which is related to the leaf area index of the orchard. And that sort of standard crop factor approach is used to relate the tree water use to the prevailing microclimate and physiological time of development. And all that physiological time of development comes from the data that we've collected through OrchardNet. So that OrchardNet database that you guys would have all heard of, those who have been focus orchards from the Future Orchards project, AgFirst have compiled this database, and we've used that database to get a series of curves to derive an age relationship for yield. So, for example, you can see the Granny Smith chart on the top there. When your trees are about sort of 10 years old, we can be fairly sure they're sort of sitting at around 75 to 90 tonnes a hectare, or 90 tonnes a hectare. And that sort of average and upper quartile of the yields gets imported into the tool in a series of slides that you can't see. And it also gives us a really good understanding of your of the phenological timelines, because that also gets inputted into the OrchardNet database. So we know from a growing degree days perspective and from a phenological timeline perspective when the tree is doing certain things. And then there's the same chart below for Pink Lady. I mean, one of the risks here is that at the moment we've only got data on 4 varieties. So this is what's so critical, that the more data we have, the more data that we can mine from OrchardNet, the more reliable the tool is going to be. And so obviously it's really important for us to know exactly how much nitrogen your tree is using over the period of the growing season. So one of the ways in which we've been able to do that is by setting up fertigation trials where we've applied nitrogen in the form of 15N, so it's a stable isotope of nitrogen, allows us to track the movement of nitrogen through an apple tree and over the course of a season. So for example, we fertigated 1 or 2 months after full bloom. That's about, sort of early, we were in Tassie at the time, and this was kind of mid-November, and this is the time when I guess remobilization finishes and root uptake starts to happen. And so we've done a control, a 0 nitrogen treatment, and we did a full rate of about 50 units a hectare, a half rate, and then a 50-50 split where we put on half the nitrogen pre-harvest and half the nitrogen post-harvest. And all this data has been used for us to really get a handle on what a tree does with nitrogen over a season. And so in the chart on the left, you can see the total nitrogen in the tree's leaves. So this is the lamina, so this is what's stored in the leaves, not the PDO, but in the leaves over the course of the season. And a fascinating data point here is, say 19 weeks after fertigation is when the fruit actually comes off the tree. And you can see a big spike in the nitrogen content in the leaves, obviously because that fruit is such a strong sink for nitrogen. As soon as that fruit gets removed from the tree, that nitrogen is able to move elsewhere throughout the canopy. But what is really interesting is on the chart on the right, where you can see, say, in that orange line down the bottom, that's the post-harvest application. So this is actually, the chart on the right is actually the 15N, so your fertilizer nitrogen component in the leaves. And you can really see that building in the spring application, the 50-50 split, at the start of the season, immediately post-fertigation, and then that starts to decrease as those trees use that nitrogen. But what is really interesting is that week 20, week 19, 20 of the orange line, which is your post-harvest application. That's you can see that there's a little spike there, but there's very little draw up of that nitrogen, and that really demonstrates that this sort of post-harvest application is actually really quite inefficient. So that's the leaf end story. What about your fruit end story? Well, what we've done is at dormancy in over 2 seasons, we excavated whole trees and we partitioned the nitrogen throughout the tree by doing the analysis of the 15N, so the fertilizer N component. So everything that we've applied as fertilizer, we can track into the various organs of the tree. And say in the pie chart on the left, if you look at the green, the big green section, that's fruit. We know just about 50% of the nitrogen that we apply pre-harvest goes into the fruit. And if we're using a very small amount of nitrogen, say regular small amount of doses, we know that that's actually not going to have a negative impact on fruit quality outcomes. It's only when you start doing quite big dumps of nitrogen of any more than 40 or 50 units a hectare, that's when you start having issues with fruit quality outcomes. But that's really important for us to know exactly where that nitrogen's gone. But what is really interesting is if you look at the total fertilizer N recovery, you can see on the left 9.7 grams of N per tree, on the right 5.3 grams of N per tree. That right-hand pie chart is everything that was applied post-harvest. We put on the same amount of N pre-harvest versus post-harvest, and about 50% less nitrogen was taken up. So this is our recommendation to growers, is that we can achieve good fruit quality outcomes. We can achieve good storage organ outcomes. So we know that tree is going to be full of nitrogen still at the end of the growing season if we do small regular amounts of nitrogen application pre-harvest. And that is how we sort of have inputted that into the model. And so, obviously all that data then goes, this is what the model looks like, right? So we've got a nitrogen demand curve obtained by a least square fit to the experimental data. Leaf data functions is a function of days after bud burst, and that can be rescaled using growing degree days for other locations. And the fruit data is a function of days after flowering. So, and that's also rescaled using growing degree days and a length of harvest window that we've got from OrchardNet. Again, this is all about the amount of data we can get from OrchardNet from the different varieties. Okay, so this is what this is kind of like the front end of the model. This is what you guys can actually input. You can input your variety. You can use pull down menus to enter your orchard attributes, your variety, your age, your tree spacing, your row width, and then you press the button to update that so that all gets input. So this is after you've selected your soil type, after you've selected your climate type, then you've got, give us some details on your orchards. And the other really important thing is your irrigation infrastructure. So we need to know whether you've got a microjet system or whether you are drip irrigating. You need to know the rate, the emitter spacing, the duration of the events, and then your return period. So how long is it between times when you actually irrigate? And there's options, other attributes there for you to be able to change how you do that or set your own strategy essentially. And you've got choice whether you want to see these units in millimeters or megaliters per hectare, whatever is easier for you to understand. So, these scaled outputs are produced using including expected yields, and this has all come from the orchard network that from across the country, where growers have inputted their data over the last 7 or 8 years. Plant nitrogen, leaf and crop, leaf and fruit, phenology. So this is all your dates of bud burst, flowering, and harvest, and then your tree crop factors. So your tree water use relative to the inter-row grass sward, ETO. We can calculate set points of irrigation that depend on soil water holding capacity from all our soils work, drought tolerance, and root depth. And then this sort of gets integrated into the overall, I guess, representation of the model down the track. So moving on, essentially what this will actually show you. So just that little table on the right, we know for example, we at this site there's fill capacity of 403, the refill point at 335 millimeters, and the wilting point at 250. This has all been estimated from all the soils work that we've done. So for the purpose of the demonstration, here's a few worksheets from Sonata that are used to select the climate and soil data and display the tree water use as a function of all these factors, including the age and variety of the trees. And so, for example, here is the climate zone Tatura. We've selected the soil series, Victoria, and the variety Fuji. And this is tree age 6 years. So you press to recalculate that. We know that at that site, over the last 20 years, the ETO is about 1230 millimeters, and the rainfall is about 457 meters. To achieve an annual water balance for the orchard, we need an irrigation volume of about 412 millimeters. And here is what, so the last 7 to 8 years look like. And that's that bottom chart on the right. And then here is a season on the top chart on the top right is the seasonal tree water use and the expected values of what happens, what a tree does with water over time. And then from there, you can use this. Actually, I might just go back once. I might just go back one slide here. Essentially, go back to this. Once you've recalculated this point, if you go down to the bottom left table, in the tan colored table, the expected yield, for example, of that Fuji 6 years old is about 50 tonnes a hectare, with an upper quartile of 63. And what that will actually show you is that the mean amount of nitrogen that comes off from that crop over a season is about 22 units a hectare. This is really important for you to understand, okay, if this is how much yield I'm expecting, this is how much nitrogen is getting removed from my orchard every year through the crop. And this is how much nitrogen the leaves are going to be using, 46 units a hectare per season. But we also know that, so that combination of, say, 68 units gets made up of your internal recycled reserves, the fertilizer that you add, and anything that gets mineralized from the soil. And so we keep going on to Tatura. The software plots the monthly climate as a long-term average for ETO and rainfall. We know that in January, the long-term average of ETO is about 191 mil, and the rainfall is about 31 mil. So all this background data is really essential for us to be able to, for the model to work reliably. And then with that bottom table on the right in blue, it gives a recommendation of how much, on average, irrigation we're going to need to keep your crop healthy. So, for example, in January, it's about 88 millimeters. And that is also going to depend on the type of strategy that you want for your apples and the irrigation approach that you like to take. I feel like I might be getting a little bit close to finishing up in terms of timeline, but look, here is, for example, another story on Grove. So Grove is Fuji again, 6 years, and we try to keep the things the same because we want to be able to demonstrate that in a different region, we know that we get altered rainfall. We get a lot more rainfall at Grove at 754 millimetres, and it requires a lot less irrigation. The irrigation demand, so the irrigation demand is a lot different. And also, the irrigation starts and ends at different times, and there are different annual amounts due to the erratic rainfall that we have down at Grove. So I'm just going to show you what that would look like from a chart perspective. So don't worry too much about the top chart, because that's more of the ETO. So the black bars are what the tree uses. What is just the standard ETO for the orchard, and the blue bars are the rainfall amounts. But it's the bottom chart that I really want you guys to focus on, and this is what's really critical. The green bars are the tree water use over a season, and this is obviously modelled, and we've been able to match that exactly to our sap flow data. But we know that a tree uses that amount in January based on the amount of crop that you've got on the tree also. And then here is your irrigation in the red bars next to the green bars that show you the amount of irrigation plus a rainfall that you're going to need to meet the demands of that tree. And you can see those millimetre amounts in that table on the right. So look, I mean, it's really difficult to give you an overarching feel of the model until you've got it in your hands. You can put it in front of you on your Excel. It's just going to be an Excel sheet, really simple to use, and you can play around as much as you like with different, with trying to work out from your perspective what is important to assess. And so, that's what I really want to get some sort of feedback from you guys, either now in the question time or later on. Larissa will give you my email address and my phone number. I'd love to have chats with you all, telling me what is important to you to assess, because we're going to obviously give growers on the APAL website is going to sit this Excel sheet. We want to make sure it's as user-friendly and also gives you as much function as possible. I think it's really important to note that there's some knowledge gaps. Those knowledge gaps are around root depth and impact of soil restriction. So, what sort of compaction you have on your orchards, root depth. So we can't necessarily predict exactly how deep your roots are going, and we might be able to estimate that, and we've estimated that in the tool. But the actual amount of root depth, and it'd be great to hear from you guys when you've grubbed trees or when you've dug trenches or whatever you've done, and you've gone, oh gee, those roots are a bit deeper than what I thought, or perhaps this root stock has a lot shallower roots than others. So that's really important for us to understand. And then obviously it's really important for us to build in flexibility to adjust irrigation set points. And this is we will need your feedback on this as well. So for example, what is your strategy for irrigation? We might be able to input a strategy for what we think might be a good way of doing things. And this is going to be really important for a conversation with Ross down the track too. What sort of strategy do you like to set for your irrigation? And can we include, say, for example, you need to build fruit size really quickly towards the end of the season. Can we build that in really quickly? And then we've also got opportunity for metrics. So we will be able to have a pretty good understanding of water use efficiency and nitrogen use efficiency, essentially, for your orchard, and then do a cost-benefit analysis. So if water costs this much per megalitre and the trees use this much a megalitre, and we've factored in a leaching amount, we can be able to do a cost-benefit analysis on your water use for that hectare or that block or your overarching orchard. So look, I think that's probably enough for me for now. I'm again, really sorry that we can't be there with you in front of you and playing with an Excel sheet. I know that might be a bit boring as well, but essentially we want to make this as functional and user-friendly as possible. Stay tuned for an update from the APAL website when it's live and ready to go. And we're going to be online, and we're keen to work with you guys to make this as functional and user-friendly as possible. So I might leave it there. If there's any questions, feel free to ask now in the chat, and or get in touch with me online or on my phone.
Thanks very much, Nigel. That was really interesting. I don't think Excel spreadsheets are all that boring. It depends what you've got in them. So your presentation really highlighted to me that there are a lot of opportunities to use inputs such as water and nutrients more efficiently without compromising yield and quality, I guess. And it also highlighted that the more information we have in OrchardNet, the better off your data and your what you're producing will be. So I'd encourage people to keep using OrchardNet. So we have one question so far. We can't see you online, but we can see how many of you there are, and there are a lot more than one person online. So we've only got one question. So I encourage the rest of you to put in some questions if you've got anything to ask Nigel. So Nigel, from Bruce, he's asking whether you found that tree water use increases with higher temperatures and stronger wind, as well as tree age.
Yes, exactly. Look, we absolutely found that. Obviously, with regards to tree age, it's really about your canopy size. But we found that there's a huge fluctuation in how much water and a juvenile, but also an adult tree will use based on temperature and wind. The upper range was sort of 23 to 30 litres a day is what we were calculating from the sap flow measurements. And if you really want specific data on that, I've got some really great charts that I'm happy to share with you that really show you exactly how much water for example, a 3.5 relatively 2D single axis tree will use when it's yielding approximately 80 tonne a hectare, and that's the data we've got from Galaxy. And very happy to discuss that with you and give you more detail on that. So feel free to get in touch.
Okay. And there's a question from Ross. So he asks whether it's possible to set the estimated yield per hectare rather than tree age. Because different orchards have very different trees at the same age.
Yeah, look, I think that's, look, it is. That's going to be something that Plant and Food are going to build into the model, the ability to actually set your yield per hectare. I mean, because I think that's if let's just say we want to do some scenario prediction. Let's just say we're sort of gunning for 90 to 100 tonne a hectare. We want to know exactly how much that 100 tonne a hectare crop's going water that's going to use and how much nitrogen that's going to use. So that will be a function of the model, absolutely. And I think what we do have to understand is that this is not at the moment. This is not for example, a real-time decision support tool. So we can't go, okay, gee, there hasn't been any rain in January, and it's really hot and it's really windy. How much water do I need? We absolutely cannot do that with this model, because that's where it will fall down. Essentially, all we can do is at the moment. I mean, so what we want to build into the next version of the model is exactly that. We want to make that fully functional in terms of, okay, we're looking at BOM forecasting, which is really important, and we're looking at all your existing irrigation infrastructure and soil and real-time soil moisture, and have that inputting into the model so that we can actually do exactly what Ross is suggesting there, where that data or that recommendation will be live via a web app or on your phone that will say, okay, based on 20 years of predictions of previous climate history, also with the next, say, 8 to 10 days of weather forecasting and your existing tree age and your existing crop demand and your existing soil moisture, this is how much water you're going to need to put on over the next week. That's the gold standard. That's where we want to get to.
That sounds great. Okay, Nigel, in the interest of time, we're going to move on to the next speaker. Thank you very much. And anybody that's got any questions for Nigel after this webinar, please get in touch with him directly or get in touch with APAL, and we'll put you in touch with Nigel if you're not sure of his contact details. Okay, so it's now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Jonathan Brooks from AgFirst, who will speak about the future orchard, where we are now and where we're going. So Jonathan has been involved in the New Zealand horticultural industry for more than 30 years and has a strong practical knowledge of pip fruit. Jonathan specialises in helping professional growers identify and monitor key performance indicators for the orchard business to find practical, cost-effective solutions to help lift performance and optimise profitability. So Jonathan, I'll hand over to you now.
Thanks, Rose. Okay, so we'll cover off what's excellence now and into the future. Right. So the Future Orchard program has basically said there's a lot of key areas that are essential for achieving it. The success of the Future Orchard will be based on ensuring all the topics are done well and there's no weak links. The presentation, as we said, is going to cover off the quality, climate, trees, labour and technology that we've covered in the past, and I want to try and keep it nice and brief, and so we're trying to put 4 years into 20 minutes, so we'll see how we go. So the first thing that I want to cover off is basically the future focus on quality. If you're not trying to actively target what the consumers are wanting, you basically will be left behind. Quality is a personal thing, and if you don't understand if you don't understand your target customer, then you can't target the quality needs that they're looking for. And it's quite important to understand that it's not the same thing for every customer. So it's that understanding what the customer that you're targeting is and where their quality specs lie. So part of that is actually making sure that growers are able to get feedback from the customers. That's both positive and negative, and then supply what they're looking for. That's a seamless information transfer through the supply chain, so making sure that you can get to the end user and understand what they're looking for, and spend time listening and learning from them, and then make adjustments in the orchard, and focus on improving where you're going. When you're talking about quality, it does take many forms. It doesn't really matter if it's bitter pit from heavy pruning, or light crop loads, or low calcium levels, or damage caused by pest, or frost, or even the colour demands that keep increasing. We need to make sure that all growers understand and make management focus to focus on where those quality specs are. When we're talking about quality, we also have the variety and company standards. The variety clubs and marketing groups can help growers with the systems and market access, and variety and brand management. So they are important for helping with this harvest and post-harvest management and market access. But it's important that they do add value to the grower, because they do come at a cost, and it's important that they are actually adding something to the bottom line. So very important, but we need to make sure that they are actually adding something to profitability. So the last part about quality that I've got here is basically customer is the king or the queen. To be successful for the future, it is critical that you understand your customer. The orchard decisions need to understand exactly what the customer is wanting, and knowledge of the customer and the market quality requirements is absolutely key. So the next subject that we covered off the next year long was covering off climate, and it's very important that when you're developing a future orchard, that you're actually developing it with a long-term sustainable plan based around managing this climate. You need to understand that orchard location and the risks, and sometimes the potential rewards. There is just because you're in a situation where you've got different climate, sometimes that's a positive, sometimes it's a negative, but you do need to know history on things like winter chill and frost and hail, heat, drought, floods, cyclones, all those things. And we need to be making sure that we're farming the right crops, varieties, and the right systems. We need to make sure we're farming how and where it's suitable to do so, and just making sure your decisions are targeting production and quality alongside the best fit with the environment. So summarising that climate thing, it's important that the growers work with their locations. They need to understand what's happening now and for the future. And they need to make sure that they're planning for success. So this means that they need to be making sure that they are using some of these models, like we saw before with Nigel, getting data to ensure that you're actually measuring, using some sort of measurements and understanding where the climate is sitting now and basically where it's potentially heading for the future. And create and develop plans and management systems that actually are best fits for that. The next one we're covering off is the variety choice in the systems. So this was what we classed as future trees. So it's the focus on varieties and growing systems has a lot of opinion, which is really quite, it's always good for a debate. People are always saying what's right and what's wrong. And it is important to understand that, the choice of varieties and the choice of systems is constantly changing through time. It's been plagued by trends and newfangled fashions. And we need to understand the risks and rewards of change. The changes need to be done at the right speed, and they need to be done right. And doing nothing is basically not an option for the future. So we need to make sure that we're seizing opportunities and we're minimising the mistakes. So this is one of the decision matrix that we actually put through in the new varieties presentations we had. And effectively what we were looking at, it's important that you're making an informed decision on your new varieties. It might be beneficial to use tools such as this, but it's however you're making these decisions is up to you. But we need to understand what the variety is as far as a market fit, and whether that be quality, market potential, and supply timing. And then we also need to understand the financial fit. Where are the returns? Where is the variety risk? And what is the variety production potential? So those things are all very important for deciding on new varieties. Next bit is to actually understanding the orchard fit. Does it suit my markets? Does it suit my harvest timing? Does it suit financially and my risk? And does it come with a group of people or marketers or growers that I'm happy to work with? Because that's a key part of it. So what you need to understand is the right variety choice is specific for your orchard business. So talking about canopy design, need to understand the different strengths and weaknesses of canopy design, but it's about function and personal preference. So not everyone will rank these factors as being equally as important, but they are all important. So some places, you do have to consider the risk of potential snow load. Other places, it's just not a factor. Some places, the labour efficiency is really critical. Other places, not quite so much, but it seems to be, this is getting more and more important. So you need to think of where this is going in the future as well. Another one that is really critical as well is that not everyone believes in the system. If you don't believe in the system, it's basically guaranteed to fail. So personal preference is really, really critical, and there can be more than one right system. So it's probably a very good example of that. It doesn't matter whether it's sort of V trellises or a formal 2D or a Fox type system, or just a standard everyday slender spindle. All of those systems do work for growers. All of them have challenges, and all of them potentially have their fit in certain places. And the people that believe in one system will often point out the problems that come with the other systems. So when you're talking about modern systems, you need to kind of have some overarching rules. And this is a lot of the stuff that Craig was talking about. The snap stuff, the simple, narrow, accessible, and productive or profitable. I also looked at this slalom stuff, which is a bit tongue-in-cheek as well, making sure you've got the light capture, it's efficient and effective. It's about the yield and vigor, and variability and eliminating of limiting factors, and just making sure it's able to be managed properly. Making sure that you actually have the system that is best fit for your specific block is probably the big key take home. So this is another one that's kind of key to my heart. Very easy to go through and say we need to pull everything out, but you can't change everything at once. So when you're talking about existing orchards, we need to monitor the performance in all of the blocks, and that's where the likes of the OrchardNet stuff is working really, really well. We need to make sure that we're actually getting through and getting all the data collected. We need to make sure that each block is working to its best potential. So we also need to look at it and keep upgrading the orchard at the right speed. So that's 5 to 15% a year. But when you start to move things faster than that, you do tend to have some trouble. So the next thing is keep your eyes open. The improvements in the consumers, improvements whether it be for consumers or climate or systems, things that are coming forward at you. So what's an existing block and a good block now may have some challenges for the future. So, and eventually those are the blocks that will be, once you get too hard, they eventually do need to come out. But little improvements on existing blocks do matter. So this is one that I've got. I mean, this is not really the future. 30 to 40 tonnes per hectare is not going to be sustainable. But the question really is, can that be improved until it gets removed? Is there something you can do through that? Because at the moment there's not enough light capture, there's not enough yield, and very, very hard to get high yields of high quality fruit out of those sort of systems. All right, next we have running on the canopies themselves, so running off the varieties. Now we're talking about canopies. And we need to make sure that they all meet the current and future needs of the climate mitigation and management. So that's part of the system. We need to make sure that they're meeting the needs of quality and customer demand, production profitability, task efficiency. So it's important all the links in the chain are strong. So if you fail in any one of these areas, you're likely to fail with the whole system. So the next bit is about, next season was about labour and task management. Backwards. So really important, labour is a huge cost to growing, and it's kind of one of the low-hanging fruit for ensuring we're doing it correctly. Sometimes the hard part is actually quantifying what the job is and how to actually make sure that you're doing it correctly. So it's about planning, systemisation, monitoring and management. Then you come up with the solutions, whether they be short and long term. We also need to understand the big picture impact of labour. So it's not just about what we're doing now or the job we're doing today, but what does that mean later on and through the season and to the end task of producing the best quality and the best yield. So when we're talking short-term solutions, it's critical that we're actually creating plans, whether it be around crop load or vigour or pruning, thinning. We need to make sure we're able to measure and monitor the performance, whether it's counting buds or branches at the moment, or whether it's counting clusters in spring or fruit or measuring vigour, whatever it might be. Then when you're going through and giving tasks to people that are doing the work, you need to be able to give good, clear instruction and make sure that it's being done correctly. So another one that's very important to remember is that tasks done well early on, such as pruning, often make it easier or cheaper later on. So not only is it about getting the right job done for the right price, it's making sure it's done correctly. So you've got to minimise the worker decisions. So keep it simple. How many branches, how much detail? And then tying into that is just other tools that we talk about, whether it be dormancy breakers, vigour, whether it be control of nutritional or water or whatever it is, just to reinforce the idea that you're trying to achieve with your pruning or thinning or all the other things that you're doing. So lots of small gains add up. So when you're thinking longer term from a labour solutions point of view, the big picture decisions, we're also always looking at labour efficiency and effectiveness. So it's all about making sure we do have the correct system to make sure that labour is as efficient and effective as it can be. We need to understand things like genetics and varieties so that we do have the best colour, we do have the right size. And then we're talking about future technology, things like sensors and robots, and whether it be pruning or harvest, or even down to simple measurements and bits and pieces. So making sure you've got excellent canopies, reduces waste. So there's no point growing fruit if we're not going to be harvesting it correctly. So the next on there is about improving labour productivity. So to improve productivity, you need to understand what changes the potential of worker, whether it be distance or fatigue, whether it be ease of task, whatever you've got that makes them either work better or worse. And then we've got to understand, if we want to improve the productivity, is it about changing the worker, or is it about changing the working conditions? Because both of those will actually improve the productivity. So if you're talking about changing the worker, I always thought this is a pretty effective little worker here. Able to reach high places with a built-in tool pouch or a picking bucket. Does have some challenges. A bit hard to give clear and simple instructions, and a bit hard to keep training. So this is a key part. When you're talking about efficiency and effectiveness training, it's about minimising movements. It's about reading the trees. And it's about correct equipment use, making sure you use the right tools. Other thing is, it's key is making sure that the workers are motivated to do the job, to work hard, and make sure that they're actually being checked and given feedback. If they're doing it correctly, they need to know that, and if they're not doing it correctly, they need to know that as well. So next on the list is talking about changing the work. So, we all are well aware of this scenario where we're picking on ladders. Craig talks about walking up Mount Everest. As far as this is the work that these guys are going to be doing, and then we're now talking about using platforms. It is an introduction of a new way of doing stuff, and a lot of it is being done already in Australia. But we all know that the systems and the ones that we're doing need to be suitable for the orchard they're actually working in. So again, it's about minimal movement. It's about having a motivational environment. It's a lot more fun sitting on the platform and having a little bit of an ladder while you're working instead of up a ladder. It's about keeping the task simple, and it's about sometimes improving multiple tasks. So this system that we're talking about here, this can be used for tree training, this can be used for thinning, this can be used for picking, this can be used for pruning. So, as I said before, it's about specific orchard business solutions. So that is not going to be suitable for all orchards. Like a nice flat orchard, we've got a 2D system in there, it works well. So the next one we have is about people. Key part of it, when we're talking labour, how do we find and keep them? Past, and obviously there's been a lot of grey nomads and backpackers coming through. New Zealand, we're talking about RSEs, and you have the seasonal workers coming in from some of the islands as well. But how are we going to keep them? How are we going to find them? And what is it that do we find them through Twitter or Facebook? What is it that actually keeps them going and keeps them wanting to come back to our orchards and do the work we want them to do? And the next question is, what's going to happen with COVID? Likely to be less tourists and potentially a risk on the seasonal worker programs, and potentially there's maybe more unemployed people looking for work, but it's the worker hygiene challenges that might come with it. So yeah, it's going to change things for sure. So from a labour point of view, we need to focus on continuous improvement. We need to understand how do we ensure that the pickers and the workers are doing the jobs that we require, and how do we actually make sure that they're actually going to be here for the future. We need to focus on long and short-term improvement. It's the right job, it's the right price, and it's the right people. So next we're going to cover off the technology, future technology stuff. One thing that is important is, there's lots and lots of different technologies that are out there, all sorts of different ways of collecting data and making things more and more whiz-bang and fancy. The implementation of the correct technology will be a key piece in the long-term sustainability of the businesses. There is a lot of cool toys out there. Not all of them are actually adding value yet. Some of them are very, very valuable. So it's actually going through and working out what fits for you and how are you using it to make your job more effective and more efficient. So the next thing is what we need to do is we are looking for improvements in how we collect and process data, as well as how we carry out tasks to ensure we're still competitive in the future. So all these things that you guys have seen through, all the sensing information, data management, automation, and even just in the design, orchard design, those sort of things, all key parts of new technology coming through, and all key parts that we need to be well aware of and understand where they fit for your own personal orchards. So when we're summarising technology, for new technology to be correctly adopted, needs to be commercially available, cost effective, needs to be able to create decisions or actionable outcomes, focused on efficiency and effectiveness, adaptable to the orchard system, and it'll work for the team, and it must be able to add value to the business. So not all new technology will provide gains. Understanding what works and what doesn't work is really, really important for the future. So there is some nice shiny stuff out there at the moment, but not all of it's suitable for every block. Last slide, and second to last slide, and through here, it's quite busy, but it's just a understanding why we're targeting future excellence. It's about the health and well-being of the community and the environment, and sort of the overarching sustainability of the orchard business. What are we going to do? What we need to focus on is understanding global and local requirements, understanding integrated systems within our business to make sure that they kind of fit. We need to focus on zero waste or minimal waste. And then we also need to focus on that quality, like we said before, making sure it's about taste and nutrition. What is it the consumer is actually looking for? Then the last is how we're going to do it. It's about implementation of technology and innovation, finding solutions, and learning and applying the things that we've actually learned. It's policy, public demand, and industry leadership is how we're going to actually get through and target that excellence. It's about finding the best solutions and integrating them into the businesses. So if we're talking targeting excellence, basically it's about developing an excellent culture based on quality, climate, and orchard and labour needs, and then getting those ideas and technologies to continuously look at improvements. And that's not any different now, and it won't be any different in the future. So making sure that every day we're getting up, we're trying to get up and make sure that we can do a better job. So that's me. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. It looks like you've identified quite a number of decision-making points across the orchard. I was wondering, you mentioned technology. Is there any technology that stands out for you as being of more benefit or really beneficial to growers that you've come across that's working really well?
For me, one of the key parts of the technology that I think is highly important is actually around data capture, is around you can't change things that you don't measure. So whether it be counting or measurement or understanding of what's happening within the business, the better we get at that, the more chance we've got of making improvements. So right at the moment, you know, when I came through and started orcharding, people were told to go and prune a tree. Now we go told to go and measure how many buds are on a tree and branches and what size those branches are and what the vigor status is and all of these bits and pieces. Then we prune the tree. So and it's just taking everything to the next level. So yeah, that's where I think it's a key part of it.
It makes a lot of sense, and it feeds quite nicely back into what Nigel's been doing with the water and the nutrients as well.
Absolutely.
And do you have a preferred system yourself for the tree canopy and the shaping and the trellising?
I think they're all kind of fun. They've all got a little bit of excitement in amongst them. You know, I'm working a lot, as you'll see in the video, I'm working a lot with the new 2D system. We have just standard slender spindle trees, which are good. I'm not maybe maybe a 2D top on a 3D bottom of a tree. I quite like that, so that, you know, I think people will be picking stuff from the ground, but the top's potentially going to be robotically picked in the future. So.
Okay, we've just had a comment and a question come in from Kevin Dodds, who's the FLA in Batlow. He says, thank you for a great summary. And over your time with Future Orchards, can you identify one of the key areas where in Australia we've made the most improvements?
For me, I think the key area is understanding that it can be done. I can remember when I first came here and people were saying that you know, people aren't going to do 100 tonne in Australia. It can't be done. And, you know, if you believe it can't be done, it won't be done. So, you know, we're getting a number of blocks now that do over 100 tonne, and it's pretty cool. So that's probably, for me, is the big game. If you absolutely believe that, you know, you can't walk that far or climb that thing, it's not going to happen.
That's a very good point. That was a great question, Kevin. Thank you. Okay, we might move on in the interest of time. Thanks very much, Jonathan. We are now going to move to Jess Fernley, who's the FLA for the Orange region. And Jess will provide an update on the demonstration trials that she's been conducting in Orange, which hopefully some of you have been able to see in person. Thanks very much, Jess.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can all see my screen at the moment. So I just want to take a quick moment just to thank everybody for jumping on this morning. I know it's a little bit of a different format, but it's really great to see that people are still engaged and want to learn about all the great things that the speakers have talked about today. So it's big thank you to everyone. I also just wanted to say that it was very inspiring this season to watch you all go through the different challenges that we experienced this season, particularly with the dry conditions, with the drought that both Wilpon and Orange struggled with. And then we were hit with the bushfires, and then this unprecedented COVID crisis, which has just changed the way we have been able to perform our normal activities. So it's just been really inspiring to see the resilience that both the regions had in this time. So yeah, thank you all for having a go, I suppose. But yeah, today I just wanted to talk about the Future Orchard demonstration trials that we did this year in Orange. Okay, so the trials that we did this year were surrounded by, were based on some main issues that were discussed with the Community Orchard Group in June, just after the winter orchard walk that we had. And the main concerns that we had were we wanted to get good growth in young trees, and how are we going to manage expected dry conditions and produce good quality fruit. So there was a lot of focus on this impending dry season that we were expected to have. And so the Community Orchard Group, which is made up of 3 Orange orchards, so we've got Peter West, Bernard Hall and Ian Pearce. So thank you guys for being part of the Community Orchard Group. But we decided that we'd do two trials. So we had a young Bravo mulch trial, which was located at Stoneleigh, so on the Focus Orchard. And then we also had a Pink Lady crop loading trial, which is based at Orange OAI, which I think all of you guys saw in the last Future Orchard Walk that we did out there. So the aim of the Young Bravo mulch trial was to determine the effect of mulch on the growth of young Bravo trees in challenging conditions. And those challenging conditions were the dry conditions that we were expected to have. And then again, similarly in the Pink Lady crop trial, we were looking at how a crop load can affect the tree's ability to continue to produce quality fruit in dry conditions. So that was looking at both fruit size and quality aspects at the end of the season. So we'll jump into the Young Bravo mulch trial first, which is still ongoing. So we're going to complete this trial in September, so it'll be a year since we started. And the problem with this focus block was that Ian was experiencing a lot of different variability. He had some trees that were quite small and then others that had taken off. And as you can see from this photo, although it's a little bit difficult because it's the middle of winter, so they're looking a bit raggedy. But yeah, so we've got different sizes all along the rows, and we just wanted to try to make these a little bit more consistent, but we also knew that we were going to have dry conditions. So how are we going to stimulate growth even if we're not going to have the resources that we need? And as you all know, the dry conditions were very much confirmed. So we had some good treatments. So the design of this trial was we had 3 different treatments, a no mulch trial, the prescribed rate, so a normal mulching, and then a double mulch. 3 rows were randomly selected, and then the treatments were applied randomly down the rows. So we had good scientific experimental design. We then went through and measured both the TCA and the tree height, and then trees were thinned heavily to encourage growth. So we really wanted to get as much growth out of this season as we possibly could. So the results so far, observations that we've seen throughout this season was that there was greater moisture retention under the mulch, which is expected. Unfortunately, I would have loved to have some soil temperature devices down underneath the row there just to see if it did reduce temperature, its soil temperature, which was really good to see, but we'll learn from next time. Visually, we didn't see a real difference, and like I said, we thinned the trees pretty heavily, so we didn't have a huge crop. But when we did some measurements on Friday, I was quite surprised about what we actually achieved. So as you can see from the TCA measurements on the initial and the interim, we actually had a greater difference or a larger TCA experienced in the no mulch trials. And then the standard application performed second best, and then the double mulch experienced the least amount of growth. And so this kind of puzzled me a little bit, and I haven't had a chance to chat to Ian about this, but I think we were expecting the double mulch even to perform the best because we're holding more water, more nutrients, and the reduced temperatures under the canopy. But yeah, we experienced better TCA in the no mulch, and then also again in the extension growth. We were nearly getting over a metre growth in the no mulch trials, and only 80 centimetres in the double mulch. So I think a floodgate has been opened, and why are we seeing these? And I think that probably is a bit of a nitrogen story. I have a theory that potentially the mulch has used up, when it's been broken down, has used up all of the nitrogen available to the plant. But to confirm this and see if that is the story, I'd like to do some soil tests and some nutrition tests in the next little bit to confirm if that is the case. And then, yeah, we'll continue the measurements and observations, and we'll look into the current nutrition program to see what the story is here. So the next trial that we did was the Pink Lady crop trial. And this was, again, we wanted some tools to give the growers a tool that we could maybe use in the future to combat drier conditions if we experience something like this again. So we had 3 crop loads, a light, medium and heavy, and I had a hand from my technical assistant to try and count buds and prune exactly to the right crop load, which was very difficult. So my hat's off to you guys when you do this in your orchard on an expanded scale. But yeah, so we had the 3 crop loads. And the results from this trial were a little bit disappointing because unfortunately the dry conditions didn't actually work in our favour. So unlike the Bravo, where the dry conditions gave us some really good results, the conditions were probably a bit too dry for this trial. As I'm halfway through the season, we actually had to turn the block off, so it didn't receive any more water. And this was because out at the research centre, our bore actually ran dry and we had no water, or little to no water left in the dam. So the research stock got the water over our poor little trees, but that's okay. We did get some really good fruit sizing every fortnight up until this point. And we did keep the trial going, and I kept watching it. And then just before we were about to harvest over the weekend, we were absolutely smashed by birds. So that picture there on the right is my trial being smashed by birds, which I know that a lot of you experienced this year as well, particularly those in Bilpin after the fires and the native birds and everything didn't get a chance to they didn't have another food source, so they chose the trees there too. So I know how it feels. Interestingly, like I said, we did get some good fruit sizing, and at the start of the season, we expected the light crop load was performing the greatest. It had the larger fruit size, but towards the end of the season, as you can see above 7 there, the heavy crop load actually did the best out of all of the treatments. So I'm not sure what the story was there. Potentially it could have been that maybe the tree had more reservoirs of water, or a greater drive to grow bigger fruit. But yes, we experienced greater fruit size in the heavy crop load within the trial, and the medium crop load performed the worst. We also did some fruit quality. So we had the light crop load had the best Brix percentage and pressure, and then again the medium performing the worst out of all of them, apart from the pressure, where it was the second best, or the heaviest was the softest of fruit. So conclusions from this trial: the light crop load had higher sugar and pressure, heavy crop load had the largest fruit, and the medium crop load performed the worst. So I'd like to do this trial again and try and get a little bit more confirmation about what happened here. And was it just a water story, and because we ran out, that's what we got the results from? Or is this actually something that we need to look a little bit further into? So the Orange Community Orchard meeting is going to be after this, this webinar, and we're going to chat about the future trials for next season. So if you guys have any feedback or any questions or ideas of problems that you might have, we can chat about those at the Community Orchard Walk. So yeah, thank you all.
Thanks very much, Jess. That was a great overview of the trials that you've been doing. I'm not meant to ask you any questions because of time, but just quickly, Jonathan has asked whether the light trees in your trial had showed excessive vigour.
In the crop trial?
Yes.
Yes. They're very old trees that we did. They're about 10-year-old trees. So it doesn't appear that they had more growth, but I haven't had a really good look. It would be interesting to kind of get some real measurements on that and see if that had an effect. It could be a different fertilizer, might have, you know, got on the lighter trees more than the heavier trees, and that experience the difference in fruit size. But yeah, we'll have to look further into it, I think.
Hopefully we'll be able to come out and see them in September.
Yes, yeah.
Thanks very much, Jess. I will now, if anyone's got any questions for Jess, please contact her at the Orange DPI. She's your frontline advisor for Orange for the Future Orchards program, and I'm sure she'd be more than happy to talk to you about the trials that she's been doing. Now it's time to hand over to Ross Wilson from AgFirst, and he's going to take us on a tour through a couple of New Zealand orchards. So instead of walking through an orchard in Australia, we are taking this opportunity to go through a couple of New Zealand orchards. AgFirst have pre-recorded 6 videos, which we will be uploading onto the APAL Future Orchards library in the coming weeks. Ross, I will now hand over to you.
We've left the highlight till the end. I noticed we've had a few drop off because we're actually probably going over time a bit, so that's understandable. But many of you from the Northern Loop will remember Mark Erickson. Mark was over on the Orchard Walk with me June in 2018, so coming up 2 years ago. Still firmly etched in my mind for some reason, and PSE and Bernard will remember the week. I can remember the night with the two of them after the Orange Orchard Walk. So Mark's a bit of a character, and we thought we'd take you for an orchard walk in Mark's orchard. So this next video is about a very high performing block of jazz at Waimar, which is Mark's orchard. Okay, welcome everybody. We're here at Waimar Orchard with Mark Erickson, the owner of Waimar, on my right, and Warren Grant, who's the orchard manager, on my left. Welcome Warren, Mark. And we're here in a beautiful sunny Hawke's Bay day today to go through with Mark and Warren one of the blocks of jazz that's on their property, because as you'll hear later, it's a real standout. But first of all, before we get into that, Mark, can you just give us an introduction of Waimar and how the property's evolved to where it is? Thanks, Ross.
As everyone on the Northern Loop knows, I like to correct Ross every so often, so I'm going to correct him and say I'm a part owner of Waimar Fruit Company, Waimar Orchards, in conjunction with my mother and father. So yeah, my wife and I run it with my mother and father, and 4th generation on this property, so caretakers of the land. Waimar in Māori means clear white water. So we're very fortunate. We've got beautiful soils here, and Ross and I have been in partnership together for the nurturing of these crops for probably the last 15 years. So yeah, Warren, our assistant manager, he's been with us for 2 years, and he's got an abundance of knowledge with tree husbandry and a lot of technical aspects too.
This has been a stunning block in terms of its productivity and profitability now for 3 years in a row. And just to give you some idea, the jazz average in this region averages about 65 tonnes per hectare. Normally it packs out pretty well, about 80% class 1. This particular block that's behind us has been doing somewhere between 100 tonne, and this year it did 115 tonne gross per hectare. It packed out at around 85% class 1. The colour was good and the fruit size was good. So although the yield was very high, way higher than the average, nearly double the average, the fruit quality was superb. So we just want to discuss what they think has actually contributed to this block being such a high performer. So Mark, what do you reckon it's down to?
Well, we talk about the 3 C's, so calm, consistent and canopy.
Yeah, I reckon we should go in and have a look at the trees, Mark, and have a look at what, you know, what's part of them. So let's do that. Another thing I'd like Mark and Warren to talk about is how they get down to their crop load target, because I think this is one of the fundamentals, is Waimar gets down to their optimum crop load target more quickly than a lot of other growers do, and I reckon that's putting a lot of the resources that the leaf, that the tree produces into the fruit that they want to harvest earlier on. I think that's quite significant, but you know, you want to explain how you do that, Mark. First with the chemical thinning, and then how Warren manages to get that fruit number at hand thinning. So yeah.
So yeah, Ross and I, we have these different recipes from the year before or the year before that. We just keep refining things. It's a living document effectively, and what's working for us doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work the year after, but hand in hand it's been working well for us. The girdle's actually been a real big positive and a big part of that success, because it's given us a reliable flower number and strong flowers going into the chemical thinning. So Ross and I, we come up with those recipes, we try to get the crop load down very early, so the primary sprays are very important to us, and Ross and I will come up with a figure. Sometimes I might put a little bit of extra in there as a bonus, what I call the feel-good factor. But I am quite an aggressive chemical thinner, because for my way of thinking, if you can get the crop load down as quick as you can without overdoing it, because it's all about making sure we've got our canopy full with fruit, then obviously it's going to pay us big dividends down the track.
Okay, another little advertorial here for Orchard Net. So Waimar are very good users of Orchard Net. And every year, every block has a target of what they're going to farm to. And this particular block, we set a target last winter actually, that we wanted to farm to about 110 tonnes per hectare of a 162 gram piece. And if you look at this tree, and perhaps Jack can sort of show you the tree, to achieve that sort of number, we needed to harvest, we thought, about 425 fruit a tree. Now, you don't always get what you thin to in a bin. There's always this pick out that we call it. But last year, Warren, as the orchard manager, had a target to thin these to, and the target was 483 fruit per tree at thinning. So you got it right, Warren. You want to just tell us what you did to actually achieve that?
Yeah, just following on from that, Ross here. Ross does very good work setting up these plans with Orchard Net for what we want to thin to. We'll do pre-counts after we put a chemical thinner through before we hand thin, and we'll get a feel for what we need to thin to on the tree. Whether what we aim for is ideally everything in singles, but that's not always possible. Having done the pre-counts, we garner some good information throughout the block. We set up a recipe of how we're going to hand thin and what number we're going to hand thin to. We'll set up very simple rules for the thinners when they come in for their hand thin, and we'll stick to those rules and monitor that very closely.
Okay, so everyone loves a pruning demonstration, so now we're going to do a pruning demonstration on these trees, take you through what we're doing. Just to give you the fundamentals, we're actually targeting 115 tonne this coming year. We reckon on this block we need about 2.5 buds per fruit. That's where we've been the last few years, and we're happy with the vigour cropping balance that produces. So that means we're targeting about 1150 buds per tree. And we've got to leave the best 1150 buds on the tree. We've got to prune the tree so there's good light to all parts. Typically this is a 3.7 metre row spacing. We've decided that the tree cropping height wants to be no more than 4.1 metres, which Warren's got a measurement on his hydroladder. So 4.1 metres maximum height. We're aiming for 24 branches in the tree. And now Warren's going to take us through how he achieves those goals.
Yeah, we can't stress enough the importance of good consistent pruning So I'm just about to remove a dominating branch here in the upper part of the tree. We take our big cuts out of the tree first. I'll normally go through with a chainsaw actually, throughout all the blocks, and make those decision cuts. So then when we send the pruners through on ladders, they are not having to think too hard. We'll set them some very simple basic rules. There's another removal of a branch here. That's my 2 cuts up here, and now I'm ready to prune the top of this tree. We always seal our cuts with a bit of what we call garrison. There's also a product called back seal, just to protect the tree against any disease. Starting at the top here, we'll leave what we call one sap drawer on the centre of the tree, and I'll remove any long upright growth first, or anything very close in to the trunk, and then I'll just follow my branch along and look for big spur clusters or wide arms which aren't required. And then I'll just move my way down the tree, follow each branch and be systematic in how you prune. Then things are not overlooked and missed. The rules that we apply for our what we call our detail pruning, we take any upright branches that are right along the plane of the branch. Anything that's laying along the top of the branch that's long and rank we'll take. We'll try and leave side arms where we've got nice open space and light. And then on the ends we sometimes will single the end off. When we've got competition here, we want to reduce the bud numbers. The only other rule we have in here when we have far too many bud numbers and bud density is we will halve up some of these bud clumps, or sometimes total removal. In this situation here, I'm just going to remove this particular clump here and halve it, instantly reducing the numbers. I might even do the same here and just halve that, just to reduce the numbers at thinning time. Yep. Here we go now. So I make my decisions on the fly as I go, and I'll follow each branch. And over the top here has to go a young branch like this. We want it to grow more, so I'm going to run it very slender. Once I've done my main cuts off here, I'm just going to double check if there's anything I've missed. I might do a few spurs in there, a couple of there. Maybe I'll get rid of that one, I don't like that one now, and just leave that spur. That's a finished product.
Hey, that was great video, Ross. It's really nice. And we've got a question here about what the chemical thinning program is that Warren applies. Are there primary chemical thinners as well as secondary thinners?
Yeah, good question. It's definitely one of the keys to success. I think in terms of getting your crop load down to target as soon as possible, puts more of the energy of the tree into the fruit that you're likely to pick, which will give you better dry matter and better fruit quality and better size, obviously. So Mark is a very aggressive chemical thinner. It does involve both a primary program and a secondary program. Typically, it will be 1 or 2 ethereal applications. He loves the product ethereal. We know it's very good at fetching return bloom. And jazz can be a little bit biennial, so that's always the base primary thinning. He'll add ATS to it, potentially in the same mix, particularly late, so targeting that 1-year wood. And then, depending on how the primary thinning program has gone, and that's a lot of walking the block and looking at the drop. We'll go in with a BA or a BA A&A combination, and potentially more than one if we've still got a lot of work to do. So yeah, very aggressive chemical thinning. Any other questions, Rose?
Thanks very much, Ross. Okay, well, we might wrap it up for today then. If you've got any other things that you'd like to discuss with Ross, Jonathan, Jess, or Nigel, please follow up with them directly or get in touch with us at APAL and we'll get you in touch with them. I'd like to thank Jonathan, Nigel, Ross, and Jess for sharing your research outcomes, your experiences and your insights, and the New Zealand orchards, of course, and the growers over there that have taken the time to share their experiences and what they do in their orchards with us online. I'd also like to acknowledge that this project is funded by Hort Innovation using the Apple and Pear Industry R&D Levy and contributions from the Australian Government. APAL has more webinars coming up over the next few months, which you can see here on the screen. Some of them actually touch in a bit more detail on some of the points that were raised in today's Orchard Walk. If you've got anything that you're particularly interested in, please let us know. We'd be really interested to get your feedback as well. So in the meantime, stay healthy and hopefully we'll be able to see you in person in the future orchard walks. Thanks very much for attending.